You think about a marriage as an example, right? And having that relationship with a partner. And when it's really strong, what you can achieve, right? And when it falls apart, it falls apart, right? It's similar to that, financial partner that you can find, right? If you can have that strong relationship with your financial partner, the opportunities are endless in terms of the upside, right, to that relationship.
I think I'm going to walk into a Meridian and say, I'm looking for my financial husband. Welcome to today's episodes of Worldview's Community Financial Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Justina Kanza, and this is your go-to podcast on all things community economic development, financial literacy, inclusion, and innovative solutions beyond traditional banking. And so today I'm excited to learn alongside you on credit unions as an alternative to traditional financial banking, from their founding principles, their origins, and how they've been able to help communities through economic uncertainty. And I'm excited to be seated today with Juanita Fonseca, who's a seasoned financial services executive with a robust background in customer experience, operations and sales. With over 26 years of experience working in the credit union sector, Juanita has held various leadership roles focused on driving revenue growth, optimizing operational efficiency, and delivering exceptional customer experience. And throughout her career, she's also modeled her belief that results are achieved by encouraging diversity of thought, embracing individual talents, and creating a climate of trust. And she has a talent for building high-performing teams and developing innovative strategies to meet and exceed business objectives. And most recently, Juanita served as a senior vice president, retail and operations for one of Canada's largest credit unions, where she demonstrated success in driving strategic initiatives and managing complex operations and implementing process improvements to enhance overall performance across various disciplines. And I have so much to learn from Juanita as I'm reading this. I have so many questions coming to my mind, but I'm also hearing that you're committed to personal growth and service, and that you live by purpose statements to be happy, to be present, to learn, and to grow, while nurturing your mind, your body, your soul, and to better serve and lead others. Juanita also holds an MBA from Dalhousie University, and is a U of T alumni, just like me, and recently completed the Credit Union Leadership Program at St. Mary's University, and also serves as an independent director on the boards of TO Live and Habitat for Humanity, GTA. Juanita, thanks for being here with me. I feel so honored, reading this and getting to know you, and thank you for making the time to share your wisdom and knowledge with us today.
It's my pleasure, Justina, to be here with you. And thank you for reading that bio. I think it's, as I listen to it, it feels like it's a bit of a mouthful. So I appreciate you honoring my background for me. Thank you.
Absolutely. It was such an honor. It was no mouthful at all. It was such an honor. I think this is a wealth of experience that you have accumulated and that you're willing to share with us today. And you've shared through your service in different capacities. So, of course, the very least I could do is honor it by reading it out loud.
Thank you.
But to begin and to set the stage, credit unions, like I mentioned, I have zero understanding of how credit unions work, where they come from. So I'm looking forward to learn alongside the audience today. But could you please give our listeners a brief overview and history of credit unions and their origins, and where a concept of a member-owned financial institution came from?
Yeah, credit unions have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. And there's been informal credit unions as well as formal ones. So back in the 19th century, there was a credit union that was formed in Europe. And that's how it kind of all started, from a formal standpoint. And during that time, workers as well as farmers were looking for ways in order to create some financial services for themselves to help one another out. So it's really based on, people helping people. And through that, they pooled their money together. And then they were able to borrow from those funds in order to serve their financial needs. So it's a really interesting concept that started way back when. Here in Canada, the first credit union was started by a gentleman by the name of Alphonse Desjardins.
Interesting.
And that was in 1900. And he formed a credit union that is now known as Desjardins Group, Caisse Populaire. And in the US, I'll just share that just so we're covering a bit of North America here. In the US, Alphonse Desjardins then took that concept and he took it to New Hampshire in the United States. And he was able to form a credit union there in 1908. So, they moved very quickly across Europe into North America. And from there, it just continued to grow across the globe. And then when you think about member-owned organizations or member-owned credit unions, these credit unions were, like I said earlier, people helping people. So they would bring their funds together, one member, one vote, and they would, as a membership, decide how they wanted to take those funds that they had pooled together and invest it to best serve the needs of the credit union. And back then, they would come together based on a common need. So it could be, at the time, maybe they were all working for the same organization, in the same industry, or maybe they lived within the same community.
That is beautiful. And I'm hearing a lot of what in the African context, at least in Swahili, we call ujamaa, which is social cooperatives, social economics, which is based on a founding principle of mutuality, of community, of collectivism. So it kind of makes sense to me that it was able to spread quite quickly as well from, say, Canada to the US, because it's really focused on community and people coming together. But what are some of the other founding principles that you find are at the core of credit unions?
So I think, there's 7 principles, cooperative principles with that credit union subscribe to. One of which I just discussed, which is around the member democracy. So, one member, one vote, having a say in who your board of directors is going to be, that's very important. And, determining how those funds are going to be spent, whether it's helping individuals, families, or the community. The other one that's really interesting to me is with cooperatives coming together to cooperate, with one another. So what you'll find in the system is that credit unions or centrals will come together either at a local, a national level to create change or make things better for their membership. So a perfect example of that would be in the credit union system. There's a company called Aviso, and they offer wealth management services. And that was formed by the credit union centrals, as well as cooperators and Desjardins coming together as partial owners to be able to offer those wealth management services through Aviso to many of the credit unions that you see exist today.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And the one other principle that's really near and dear to my heart is concern for community. So what you'll find with credit unions is that they are working side by side within their communities. What they do not do is just give a handout of money, right? And say, here you go. Here's, this is the money that's going to go towards the cause that's important to you. They certainly will do that, most definitely, but they also want to be there to understand, what are those funds going towards? Can they come up with other products, services, new innovation that's going to help that community to best serve their needs?
Amazing, amazing. I always appreciate when organizations operate from an ethos of built by us, for us, with us. And so creating innovative solutions alongside the community and having those conversations to understand what is it that you need is a different way that this need can be delivered. But that is a perfect segue into my next question around community focus, but also ownership structure. So what's the fundamental difference between credit unions in that they're member owned and for-profit banks? What's the role of community in that member owned credit union structure?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there when you talked about profit, right? So with a bank, they're definitely concerned about making a profit for their shareholders. The shareholders will elect who the board of directors are, and the shareholders are there to ensure that they're earning a dividend on their investment, right? They want to make sure that they're making money. And they don't necessarily, I would say their customers don't necessarily have a voice to be able to contribute to, what the impact is that that particular traditional bank may be making within the community. Whereas within the credit union, very different, not for profit. They are there to share in the needs of the community. And so any profits that are earned, they're looking at what does the community need that they're serving. So that could come in the form of sharing those profits back to the community in the form of dividends. It could be coming up with an innovative product, again, that's going to meet the needs of the community. Just various ways they could be thinking about community development that's required, or community initiatives that are required that are going to lift where individuals live, work, and play.
Amazing. And a lot of what I'm hearing is bringing in the community in the decision-making process. Okay, this is the profit that we've made. How do we give it back to the community? What is it that the community needs in terms of economic development? So empowering them with those resources and that decision-making power. But my other question is around financial literacy, because I think a huge part of giving people the power to make decisions is also give them information and make sure they're well equipped with that. How have you seen credit unions work around financial literacy of communities?
It's such an interesting concept, right? Financial literacy. And one of the organizations that I worked at, it was a no-no to even say that, right? Because you want to be perceived, you don't want to be perceived as someone that knows more than you, right? Or a feeling that you're illiterate in the way that I'm speaking with you. So I love the way it was the CEO at Meridian Credit Union, Jan Guilfoy. She would talk about financial confidence. Right.
I like that.
And eliminated that concept of financial literacy within the credit union system. And so to the point of, at their annual general meetings that they would have with their members, taking the opportunity to bring small business owners together to sit on a panel, share their knowledge with other small business owners so that they can learn and grow their businesses. And you think about the trickle down impact of that, right? With that knowledge, they're then taking it back to their community, they're taking it back to their business, right? And then they're thriving based on that. Or, bringing in a speaker to talk about financial well-being. So it can take many different forms. That's the annual general meeting that Meridian had. Others are using platforms called Each One Teach One. And you've heard of it before. It sounds like
that.
Yes. And so those are individuals or volunteers that will go out into the community and teach people about financial services, various products, services. And what's great about that is it's not about selling product. Right? It's about really lifting people up to understand and boost their financial confidence.
I feel so enlightened and educated, because in as much as in our efforts to be inclusive, sometimes we don't realize that we're being exclusive with our language, and using language like financial literacy, which is a word that I've thrown around a lot as well, is just like a call out moment. Like, how many people are we making feel that they are illiterate, so much so that they don't feel comfortable to then come into this space and be empowered and have their confidence boosted. So thank you for making that very important distinction.
Thank you.
And it's also good to see that credit union, similar to the work that Wovio is doing, is very focused on financial empowerment beyond anything else, the each one teach one concept, but also a spirit of knowledge sharing, a spirit of resource sharing, because there's the strength in numbers on that front for sure. And my question...
Sorry, Justina, I was just going to add to that as well, because I think in today's world, with all of the immigration that's happening as well, it's so important that we take the time to talk to one another and understand what those differences are, right? And that's one great thing. I know in one of your podcasts, you talk about at Wovio, right? What Roscoes have been called in different organizations, different countries, right? And if we understand that here in Canada, and we take the time to understand the differences or even the similarities across the world as immigrants come into this country, it's just going to make for better conversations, and we're all going to be thriving as it relates to financial services.
Absolutely. And I've seen that with food as well for me. Like I have friends who always wonder how come I'm able to find food that's similar to food that we ate back home, but it's all in the language. Like if we can understand that this, like sorrel leaves, like it's very popular back home. We call it lumanda, and it's very popular in Canada, and most people don't know about because we don't know what it's called. And so even in the terms of ajo or like rotating saving circles or credit unions, like this is a concept that's very popular in different parts of the world. But part of being inclusive is how do we have these conversations with each other to understand how it's done and make sure that we have the right language usage around that. Amazing. Okay. So my other question was around competitive rates and fees, because like we mentioned, there's different focuses for credit unions versus traditional banks, which are very for-profit driven. So do credit unions generally offer more competitive rates or savings accounts or lower fees on loans and other products of such sort?
So I wouldn't say that this isn't always, right? Do they offer competitive rates? Most definitely. But like any other, financial institution, there's going to be moments where you're number one on the list or you're number two on the list. And I think for credit unions, it's not all about rates and fees. They're definitely about providing access to financial services and making sure that, they do have checking accounts where they're not as exorbitant in fees as other financial institutions would be. But in terms of the rates, yes, it's great. Everybody wants to earn, a good interest rate on their deposits. Credit unions will do that for you. Someone wants to pay lower fees on, their accounts. Credit unions can do that for you, right? You want professional advice. They can do that for you. But what credit unions want more is the relationship. And if they can develop that relationship with you, then they can understand what goals you want to achieve, and then they can help you to achieve that goal. The difference with credit unions is that they can take that time to truly understand and go deep in their conversations with you, as opposed to you coming into me and just saying, hey, I want a checking account. And I say, okay, I'm going to sign you up for the checking account, and it's done, right? That to me sounds very transactional. And that typically happens in the banking world because you're about meeting quotas and targets, right? Whereas in the credit unions, taking the time, setting up multiple meetings, in fact, or building financial plans together to achieve those longer term goals, that's kind of where the conversation starts, as opposed to just the transaction. So not just about the fees, Justina. I think, you look at things from a more holistic approach. And if you're a rate shopper, then credit unions may not be the place for you, right? Because you're going to be jumping around back and forth, and you won't have the opportunity to really build that key relationship with someone that can help you achieve those longer term goals.
Absolutely. And it's less scalable, I would add as well, because then you don't have someone who's got a holistic understanding of your life and is able to suggest solutions and resources that align with the bigger picture of who you are versus, someone who's just had a one-off conversation with you. So there's lots of value there.
You think about a marriage as an example, right? And having that relationship with a partner. And when it's really strong, what you can achieve, right? And when it falls apart, it falls apart, right? It's similar to that, financial partner that you can find, right? If you can have that strong relationship with your financial partner, the opportunities are endless in terms of the upside, right, to that relationship.
I think I'm going to walk into a Meridian and say, I'm looking for my financial husband. No, but I hear your point. I'm always of the opinion that there's value in numbers. There's strength in numbers. And this is one way that we can bring in that concept of community, really. And you've touched on a lot of pieces of advice that folks who are looking to who are deciding whether to go traditional banks or credit unions might use as a base of consideration. Is there anything that you would add there for someone who's hearing about credit unions for the first time and they're deciding, do I stick with, say, CIBC or do I go to Meridian?
I think we're in a place right now where personal values are so important. People are talking about what's important to me. It's more than just, earning money. People are talking about experiences that they want to have from a life perspective. And credit unions think like that as well. It's very much about being purpose driven, thinking about sustainability, thinking about food insecurity, housing affordability, right? Real life problems that we are experiencing and how they can help to solve them. And so if you're an individual that holds those values near and dear to your heart, then maybe the credit union is a place to explore. And I don't think that people understand that about credit unions. They may think that they're offering credit products, right? Or just because of the name, or that they offer credit counseling. But, there's a deeper, I keep using this word relationship, but it really does come down to that. It's this deeper relationship. And if individuals can find that alignment with whatever their personal value is, maybe it's climate change, right? There's credit unions whose strategies are really committed to climate change and sustainability. So it's out there. And I think it's up to people to do the research on credit unions to figure out what the best alignment for them is.
Absolutely. And I think there's a huge piece that you mentioned around relationship building, yes, but also around what are the values that these institutions stand for, because we're in times where we have to hold institutions accountable to make sure that they're taking care of the earth and of the universe, just as we are. So really looking for those values, and that looks like not having predatory lending practices, right? That looks like being eco-friendly in whatever ways possible. And I think credit unions, just by virtue of them being for the community, that's top of the priority list. But one question that comes to mind is, in terms of uncertain times like this with the economic crisis, as others have put it, how are credit unions uniquely positioned to serve the community compared to traditional banks?
That's an interesting question, because I think everyone's working towards that same goal, right? Banks are also very concerned about economic stability. And so when I think about credit unions in particular, I think it goes back to that relationship, the big R, because if I know you at a deeper level, and if you are going through hard times and you open that conversation up in our discussion, then I'm going to be more willing and able to work with you to figure out a path forward. You take the situation of COVID as an example, and, people, interest rates were rising, people were losing their homes, credit unions were out there getting ahead of that by calling their members to see what was going on in their life. Could they help in any other way before things got, so bad that they couldn't withstand the economic storm? And I think that's a real differentiator. They were calling as well about their investments, right? When their investments were going down in terms of value, it was don't panic, I'm going to call you. I was in a situation where there were individuals that were calling from other banks to talk to our financial advisors at the time because they couldn't get in touch with anybody in a face-to-face way, at the traditional banks, but they knew that they could at the credit union, so they called there. So during times, again, of need, I think that's when the credit unions really show up, because there's others that aren't necessarily doing that. And it's just, I think it's just such an interesting dynamic as well, just people, right? So if you can develop that emotional connection, which people do, during those economic times of downturn, you have someone to turn to rather than, turn into a cocoon and wrap yourself up and not look at the rest of the world. So, there's other ways too, in terms of products and services. So, credit unions will innovate together as a group. So you think about the small business loans during COVID that were being offered by the government, and credit unions came together to quickly automate the program that was necessary to offer those small businesses those loans. And the banks were still trying to figure it out, right? So that's the other benefit of cooperatives working in cooperation, right? Yeah. Because sometimes they can innovate much faster than maybe some of the other traditional banks can.
And there's more collaboration over competition.
Yes.
So you see solutions faster, but you see solutions that are also scalable because it's multiple organizations coming together to cooperate. But you mentioned something very interesting around just having an emotion, almost like an emotional partner, a place that you can go to and have those emotional conversations. Because one of the things that came up even in our previous podcast was that money is emotional, and we have therapists for everything else, right? Like we have therapists when we're going through divorces, when we're grieving, but why not have a place that you can have that emotional outlet as well with matters of finance and matters of resources? And unfortunately, with the big traditional banks, you don't get that because you are a number, and like you mentioned, folks are always like trying to reach a quota. And I'm reminded of a very recent very short docuseries that came out on CBC around the predatory practices that happen in the bank, and how, you know, even very predatory lending practices and lines of credit are pushed to communities who don't have enough information about that, and how there's a ripple effect of like economic turmoil in communities. And this starts from our institutions as well. It's more systemic than we realize. So thank you for putting that into context.
It's amazing. Like the trust factor is so important, like you mentioned, right? And there's statistics out there that will show you that credit unions are more trusted than a bank, right? Because it speaks to relationship.
Yeah.
You can fill in the blanks now for me, I think.
Yes. So relationship with a capital R. Why do you think though? Because I hear what you're saying. I totally agree, but I still see that there is some apprehension maybe with people joining credit unions. I don't know if it's apprehension or just lack of information, because I don't bank with a credit. I'm going to Meridian right after this, but I don't bank with a credit union yet. So what's the hesitation there with people?
I think it is some of that misinformation that's out there, right? And lack of awareness. And like we said earlier, you mentioned the word credit. So people think, okay, then maybe the credit union only offers borrowing services. They don't think about the vast majority of services that are out there that traditional banks offer, that they would be offered in a credit union as well. And that's certainly the case. I think it's also just awareness, right? Marketing.
Yes.
You know, there isn't a credit union on every corner. But going back to that cooperation and collaboration that happens across the credit union system, there are systems that allow you to interact with each other's bank machines, as an example. So if you wanted to take cash out at your credit union and it wasn't, 10 minutes down the street from you, and you could drive like 30 minutes, or, you're 30 minutes away or something, you could use the other credit union's machine. So, I think that awareness would certainly help, and then there's just a lack of awareness of what is a credit union altogether. What do they stand for? You hear this term membership and you think, well, it's limited to a certain group of people. And if I'm not part of that community, or if I'm not part of, that industry or that work environment, then I can't join. But what's happened over the years is that credit unions have created open bonds so that really anybody can join. And all you do is you pay a membership share, and that membership share is going to vary depending on the credit union. But it allows for more people to join these organizations now. And people may not be aware that that has changed. And maybe in the backs of their mind, they're thinking about the historical credit unions that existed. Yeah, but they've certainly evolved as well.
Interesting. And my next question is going to be about the future, because in line with evolution. But before I get to that one, what would you say then to folks who are, because I think Canada can be quite individualistic, and maybe part of the apprehension to even join credit unions is like, well, I don't want to mix my money with others, or I just want to do my own thing. I think that's I can see that coming up as a thought in people's heads. Is that something you've heard in your line of work? How would you respond to that?
At the end of the day, you're a member. So you have a say in how you want those funds invested. And, you're going to choose the credit union that most aligns, like I said earlier, to your values, right? And what's important to you. And at the end of the day, it's your investment, it's your borrowing, and how you want to spend those funds are ultimately up to you. Your advisor is going to be there to help guide you. But that doesn't prohibit you from making those final decisions yourself. Whereas when you think about the traditional banks, they're making all the decisions for you,
Yes.
right? Around products, around where that money is being invested, what's important. It's very different in the credit union system world, right? Where you can choose who your board of directors are. And those board of directors are also members of the credit union. So you're making that vote, right? It's you that's putting your hand on that voting card and making that decision. And there's bylaws that need to be changed that maybe don't adhere to what you see is required as a member of that credit union. You have the opportunity to bring that forward. And you have that voice and that direct liaison to the CEO, which can you imagine talking to the CEO of, Royal Bank or TD or
I don't even know their names to start with. Yeah.
It just wouldn't even happen, right? But you go to an annual general meeting and you can ask your question and you'll have a direct line to the CEO and your question will be answered.
Okay. So I've gotten your advice and I've decided that I'm going to go with credit unions. I've assessed it against traditional banks and against the different values and founding principles. Where do I start? What are some credit unions that exist? Because I personally only know of like Meridian, and now I know that Desjardins, I don't know if it still is or used to be, but what are some options that people can explore even within the credit union industry, if you will?
So there's lots of credit unions. Like you wouldn't even believe how many there are just here in Ontario. And in fact, so Meridian, definitely the largest in Ontario. You've got Alterna, you've got Duca. There's the Italian Community Credit Union. Like there's multiple. There's the Ukrainian community credit union. So lots of them exist. I think again, it's going to go back to, like you said, doing that research and figuring out like what's important to you. Do you need to have a bricks and mortar close to home, right? Are you more of that face-to-face person? Are you looking for a credit union that offers a seamless digital experience, whether it be on your mobile app or your online banking, right? So credit unions, they'll vary in terms of what those service offerings look like, but they do exist. And there's so many to choose from that I know I haven't listed half of them, but there are quite a few if you just look around in your neighborhood to consider.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to do my research, and part of our resources for this podcast is we'll share a few resources of credit unions that you can take a look at. But my other question, because we've done a lot of comparison of traditional banks and credit unions, but how do credit unions then compare to rotating savings circles?
So very similar, right? When you think about a rotating savings environment where you're pooling funds and then you're determining how do you want to spend those funds. And it's kind of a democratic environment, right? Where people are coming together to decide on how those funds are going to be used, who's going to receive it when. So that's, I'd say, the similarity in terms of how credit unions operate. The difference is the variety of services, right, that credit unions would offer. So it's not just about pooling money and offering those funds to someone to borrow for a time period, right? It's pooling money and building new initiatives or products or services, or using that money for savings versus borrowing, or wealth management services. So the full gamut of services is available through credit unions versus a rotating savings.
So it's more innovative. You'd say credit unions more innovative. So it's kind of building on rotating savings circle and then some.
But I'd say Wovio is very innovative too, right? And how you've taken a concept of savings where people were actually physically transacting with cash and now being able to use the payment schemes in order to do those similar transactions without having to get together, right, in person.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a more scalable for sure. And then the added benefit of the credit building pieces and the credit scores, because we know how that's important in the Canadian credit landscape, if you will.
Yeah. And one of the sorry to
no,
cut you off there. Okay.
Go.
Yeah, one of the interesting projects that I worked on at Meridian was in partnership with the Banker Ladies Council, and as well as the Ontario Cooperative Association. And so the organization that I was with, Meridian, had contributed some funds to help increase the the knowledge and awareness and collaboration of rotating savings accounts, right? And helping those organizations to get off the ground, helping people to understand, that this is a live and well payment system that works, and allowing the BIPOC community to come together and feel that their voice is being heard, and legitimizing that as a vehicle that can be used for either savings or borrowing.
That is beautiful. I wish we had Andrea here as well from the Banker Ladies, because I do want to pick her brain. I know they've been doing amazing work with Rotating Savings Circle, but I also do know that Meridian has been a huge champion of Ross's, and even with Wavio, part of our partnership has been around, again, scaling and making sure folks have access to more lines of credit beyond what the Rotating Savings Circles can offer. And this speaks again to the collaboration piece, like where, say, Wavio falls short or where Rotating Savings Circles fall short. How do we partner with these institutions to kind of meet the goal of ensuring the community has the resources that they need to develop? Yeah. And then I know you've been in the industry for around 26 years. So I've been saying last questions, but I still have quite a few. So one question I had was around some of these case studies or personal stories that you can share from your time in working in the industries that exemplify the power of credit unions. Is there any that come to heart?
I shared the best example, which was, with
the Banker Ladies.
with the Banker Ladies. Let me think of another one though, because there's so many. Because one of the things that I loved most about working in the credit union world is being able to work or create partnerships with other organizations to lift where you live. And one of the other partnerships that exists is with Habitat for Humanity, GTA, and being able to work with those organizations to help people find affordable home ownership. And so Meridian's definitely working with those homeowners in a very different way. So helping to build their financial confidence, talking to them about what's required to own a home, right? To upkeep a home. There's a lot of information that's out there. And when it comes to buying a home, and it can really be daunting for individuals. And so through this partnership with Habitat, coming together with them to speak in a very layman's term, right? So everybody can kind of understand the jargon that's out there related to mortgages. That's been one of the highlights, and has allowed me then to become a part of the board, at Habitat, and making that impact right in the community, right? And seeing people that and these are everyday people. You wouldn't believe the people that are coming in that you'd think, wow, you should be able to afford a home. But because prices have skyrocketed,
it's ridiculous.
It's become unattainable. So these, working and just seeing people achieve their home ownership goals has been really fulfilling.
That is beautiful. You said something so beautiful that I'm going to steal and take with me. It's like live where you live. That is very, very important. In terms of then the future of credit unions and in how they hope to continue lifting where people live, what do you see that as?
Financial services is such a competitive environment. And when I think about what's happening in the financial environment, it's not only staying abreast of financial needs of its consumers, right? So whether it's products and services, but you think about technology and how things are just rapidly changing, and consumers may not want to deal face to face anymore, right? Maybe they want to a virtual financial advisor. And so making sure that credit unions are keeping up with those technology needs, personalizing service offerings, using their data and analytics to make sure that they're tailoring solutions. I think about cybersecurity issues that are out there, right? So credit unions need to continually invest to make sure that they're protecting their members' assets, and educating as well. There's a lot of seniors fraud, as an example, that's happening today. And there's a lot of education that's happening to prevent that in the future. And I can only imagine it getting worse, unfortunately. Rules, regulations, compliance requirements, all of that continually increases year over year since I've been in the industry. So I can only see that, increasing even further in the future. And credit unions need the means in which to ensure that all of those things are covered going forward.
And is there room, do you think, going forward for them to collaborate with traditional banks? what does that collaboration piece looks like with traditional banks?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I mentioned, I think I mentioned the exchange network. And so that's a network that allows individuals to use their debit cards to access their cash at other ATM machines. There are, interestingly, other banks that are part of that system. National Bank is one that comes to mind that is on there. So thinking of ways like that they can come together. You think about open banking. I think that's another area in which the banks and credit unions will come together to solve for that and determine how we can best apply open banking in the future that's safe and scalable.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Juanita, for sharing so many insights and resources. I feel a bit more learned than I was before. I feel empowered than I was before. In terms of some last pieces that you want to give to our audience, like any 2 takeaways, 2 pieces of advice on all things finance, but also particularly credit unions, especially community leaders, on how this could be beneficial to them and their communities.
Yeah, I think that so partnerships are really important. So if there are organizations that are out there that are looking for credit unions that align to their cause, that can support, whatever that cause is, I would say check out credit unions. It's not just the big banks that have, deep pockets. I wouldn't say the credit unions are as deep, but their volunteerism is higher than most organizations out there. And like I said, it's not always about the money or the hard cash. Sometimes you need the resources to affect change, and I think that's where credit unions can help. And the other advice I would say is, for people to educate themselves on credit unions, because it is a viable alternative to the traditional banks. And I think you'll find value in credit unions aligning to your personal purpose.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Juanita. Thank you for taking the time to share with us today. And where can people reach you if they have any questions? Are you open to that? What does that look like? Well, right now I don't have an Instagram or anything of that nature, but certainly the credit union that I worked at previously was Meridian Credit Union. And I'm a big supporter of them, having worked there for 27 years. And if anybody needs more information, I would say check out Meridian's website. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you. You're welcome.